This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun beating Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Hey there, welcome in. Oh, we got a new show open. How about that? We'll try not to make it too painful for you on a Wednesday morning. Thanks for being a part of Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent. Appreciate everybody who's in that open. If you're listening to it and try to identify voices, let's see if I can go backwards to forwards. There was Eric Kimry on last, Stuart Lake before then, Trey Dyson. We had Corey Miller, Meredith Taylor, everybody involved in this one. Perry Orth, Savell Newton was in there as well. Just a little sample of what we've been doing here now, going on more than a month. And really appreciate you being a part of the show. Anthony leading us off almost as always on the YouTube live stream with a Good Morning UFAs. Mark in, Craig, Jason, Colette as well. Appreciate you guys hopping on with us this morning. Clemson baseball looking for a new head coach is the headline for sure in the state of South Carolina, as we're just a couple of days removed from the NCAA baseball tournament being announced, the field of 64 that only includes Coastal Carolina from the state of South Carolina. So instead of me going off on a gas baggy rant about my perspective only to start this morning, let's go ahead and get a more qualified college baseball expert in on the show, and former Gamecock assistant, Charleston Southern head coach Stuart Lake, joining us from the beautiful shores of Gilbert. No, that's not right exactly.
No. Just in the hills of Little Mountain.
Okay, there we go. From the hills of Little Mountain, where Stuart Lake joins us with the Team USA lid. Well done, sir. Appreciate you hopping on with us this time of year. I just retweeted something that I think typifies. It sums up my perspective of college baseball. It's Miami, right? The University of Miami, apparently when they go on the field, everybody, their pitching staff, as the guys are going out to their positions, which we're trying to teach my dang 7 and 8 year olds to do. You run to your position, right? Everybody breaks out at the same time. Baseball 101. So they break out. Their pitchers are lining up in a football formation. Somebody takes a snap. They run a reverse pass, and a guy chucks the ball deep to the outfield. It's the best. College baseball is the best in so many ways, in my opinion. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your opinions of multiple things today, Stuart.
Yeah.
What about just the fun that college football is, and you've been a part of for so many years?
Yeah, and this is the cool time. I mean, Memorial Day, that selection committee, that's when it gets real. You know, the March Madness, obviously, in basketball, but this is just, I'm going to be wearing out ESPN Plus and whatever else channel to find the teams. And what I'll do through this is you track your friends, from, be watching Dan McDonald at Louisville, and you'll be trying to follow Ole Miss down in Miami. Looks like they got like a tropical storm coming in, by the way. So they may have some weather issues trying to get through that one. But, obviously it'll be all over trying to follow friends. And it's so cool because now Georgia Southern's hosting. You just never see that. And, these teams in college baseball, Tim, this might be the first year. I really have no idea. If you made me pick the 8, beside probably Tennessee and maybe Stanford, it'd be hard to say who's going to be in that final 8 when it's all said and done.
Well, there's a reason that 1999 is the last time a number 1 seed overall going into the NCAA tournament has won the College World Series. It is as unpredictable, I think, as it gets. There are a lot of familiar names that end up in Omaha, but you got to earn your way there. And unfortunately, South Carolina and Clemson fans realized that this year maybe more than ever, and that led to a change yesterday with Clemson firing Monte Lee. I know a buddy of yours, you talked about following your friends and the whole thing. I met Monte, man, I can't even remember what year it was. Adam Westmoreland was at Brooklyn Casey, and I was being a camera guy behind the plate. He had a radar gun being an assistant with the Gamecocks, and he said, hey, man, you might want to pick up your camera here and shoot this Adam Westmoreland at bat. Westmoreland hits a home run. He looks at me. He's like, I told you. And now obviously went on to 7 years at Clemson. A pretty good record overall, Stuart. 242 and 136 and 102 and 86 in the ACC. The last couple of years, though, had fallen off. And now Graham Neff, the new AD there, who's 38 years old, made me feel really old this morning, moving on. And Monte Lee no longer the head coach at Clemson. What was your first reaction? I know this is not necessarily a massive shock to anybody, but it seems like across the board, I'm hearing the same sentiment, man. It's tough to see bad things happen to good people.
Well, that's the number one thing. Is he's such a good guy, and I was disappointed. You kind of knew it may be coming. You were hoping maybe they could figure out a way to give him one more chance. And but it's part of the business. And this baseball world's so small. You mentioned Adam Westmoreland. I coached him on the JV team at Brooklyn Casey. I went on. I don't know if everybody realizes how our paths have crossed, but when I left South Carolina in the fall of 2002 to go be an assistant for Coach Pulowski at the College of Charleston, Monte followed me from Spartanburg Methodist. So our paths have been so close throughout our whole career. And I think you could see it on Twitter yesterday from high school coaches, other college coaches. There are a lot of good guys in our business. He's one of the best guys. And that's why everybody's disappointed that it worked out the way it did. I don't think anyone holds any. It wasn't like Graham Neff did something yesterday that maybe shocked the college baseball world. It was just disappointing for a lot of us. We wanted to see Monte succeed. He had a lot of success in those first 3 years, hosting regionals, just never was able to get through them. And then COVID hits. He had a really good team the COVID season. And then these last 2 seasons not make a regionals, kind of the end of that. So it'll be interesting as it kind of all shakes out to see who's the next guy, because in my lifetime, there's only been 3 Clemson head coaches. I grew up with Bill Wilhelm in this state, and then Coach Leggett took over as I started my high school, then college coaching career, and then Monte the last year. So, I mean, you're talking about like the South Carolina baseball, same way, like the Pittsburgh Steelers. There ain't many head coaches on that list. So, big decision for them to make.
And I'm glad you mentioned what the environment has been at Clemson and at South Carolina. To me, you have such massive shoes to fill. We saw it with Chad Holbrook with the Ray Tanner situation, and you feel like Monte Lee was that guy now with Jack Leggett, even though it lasted for 7 years. But the last 2 years, the numbers on that one, 60 and 50 overall, and then 7 games under 500 in the ACC. Last 5 years, the 10th most draft picks out there. So it trying to kind of shows you all the talent that has gone through there, but the expectations are there, man. And I mentioned this to you maybe last time you were on about Gamecock fans and their expectations of the program. You said, no, absolutely. They should be up there. And Clemson fans, I think, are right there with them. So now the question becomes, the Clemson program, how strong do you feel like it is moving forward now after these 7 years under Monte Lee, and how attractive of a job is it out there in the college baseball world?
Well, I think we'll always be biased if we grow up in this state. And I've been very open. I've grown up a Gamecock fan my whole life, but I still see it as an elite job. And what I see it attracting is the upper echelon of the coaches. I mean, we'll talk about it as we get into the tournament later, but Texas A&M last year did not make the SEC tournament. Much less a regional. They go ahead and say, hey, we're going to put more into this. We're going to get a guy. And they go get Coach Schlossnagle from TCU. They're hosting this year. And as I was looking through my stuff, they're not only hosting, they're number 5 national seed.
And hosting TCU.
And TCU, which is how – and you think the NCAA guys don't know that in a room. I love it when they go, oh, that just worked out. But my point being, I think Clemson's that kind of job too. I think they'll probably end up hiring a very upper end guy. And I know there was comments yesterday made on, they're going to have to pay more and do this and that. Well, probably will, but that's one of those jobs that's been known as a baseball school since Coach Wilhelm, Coach Leggett, and honestly with Monte. So I think they'll end up getting a really high-end guy to come in there, and I wouldn't be shocked to see them right back in the mix next year.
Interesting to hear that from you, because I feel like that's where fans come at it from typically, right? We get in college baseball is much different than college football in this part of the world. There are many fewer coaches' names out there that all fans know, right? We watch them in the College World Series, and outside of that, there are very few people that are really exposed to college baseball names. But you think it's going to be one of those names that most of us know?
I do. I certainly feel that whoever it is going to be playing this weekend. And if it's probably the way it will work out, they may be playing, the following weekend and in Omaha too. Those are the type coaches that I think about when you say Clemson's going to fire a guy with the character of Monte Lee who had success. Let's not act like the ship had gone under the water 4 weeks ago. He ended up with the 34th best RPI in the country. I mean, it still had 35 wins. So, I mean, this wasn't people jumping off the ship back in April, only won 26 games. This is a guy that was still running a great program, and they've decided we want to go a different direction. Well, as a Clemson fan, I certainly would hope you're telling me you want to go up, because I'm going to be honest, he's going to be hard to replace character, the way of recruiting, and what they've been doing. So I think it'll be one of those, as you say, elite type hires when they do it.
Well, we see it all the time. The older I get, the more I appreciate the fit. I think I've said that many times, right? Where you have a good job and a good, a good proven candidate or worker for that job. Sometimes they just don't mix. Why do you think it didn't work for Monte at Clemson?
Honestly, Tim, I don't know. I think it was some high-end recruits that they couldn't get on campus, which always catches you in the college game. We've gone back and talked how lucky we got. I mean, everybody knows who Jose Bautista is now. He was coming in set to be our third baseman for the 2002 season, and days before school starts, he signs with the Pirates. So we were just so lucky that Coach Tolman knew another pretty good third baseman that turned out to be Brian Busher. But I can only imagine if we don't have a recruiter like Coach Tolman that time to plug in what tends to be another big leaguer, how it would affected. So I think Monte and them had some really high-end recruits that they thought they would get that never got on campus, and that always hurts you. And then everybody. Seems like this year's been everybody telling everybody about injuries. Hey, there have been injuries in college baseball the whole time. Okay, now it's just social media so you can broadcast it more. Everybody's dealing with injuries. Coach Tolman at Middle Tennessee State, they lost their top two pitchers in a span of 3 days to COVID and a back issue going into the Southern Miss series. Couldn't get them back. So, I mean, injuries are all over the country, and Monte has been the least to talk about them, but they've had some too. But I think it's just when you got 11.7 scholarships, and you know how I hate those numbers, but those upper end guys are almost on a 80%, 75%, and all of a sudden they don't come. Well, you're not finding another guy like that. That guy's already gone somewhere else, or he's already gone to draft. So that's my thing. Otherwise, I don't know, because I can tell you right now, if my son would have wanted to play for Monte Lee, I would have had no issue with it. That's what kind of program I felt he was running. That's what kind of baseball coach I thought he was. And that's why I'm excited to really see where he lands the next time.
Southern Cal, Arizona State, South Carolina, Clemson, all big-time programs that aren't in the NCAA tournament this year. I'm sure there are more. So do you think it's more difficult from the outside looking in? It's got to be part of the explanation of why these programs aren't in the NCAA tournament from my perspective, that it is more difficult to have that next guy lined up to plug and play if your first option doesn't work out.
Oh, extremely difficult. And I was going through before you and I got on to think that East Carolina is an 8 seed and Georgia Southern is a 16 seed and South Carolina, Clemson, Southern Cal, those teams aren't even in the tournament. I mean, that's really kind of, you almost have to go, wow, when you hear that. And, but then you look at certain programs, East Carolina, we were fortunate enough to beat them at East Carolina a few years ago. since Coach LeClaire, then Randy Mazey, and now what they've continued to do, they kind of go get those guys that come to school. And a lot of times at the bigger programs, and I've been guilty of it too at Ole Miss or South Carolina, you get the higher end guys, but like me and you, we're not going to even talk the draft until July this year. I mean, think about that. The amateur draft is still over a month away for programs to know who's coming back. I look at South Carolina and, obviously you think Wimmer's going to be a big draft, but you don't know in a 20-round draft. So for the next 6 weeks, you're going to be trying to balance out your, recruiting that way. So it's bizarre.
No doubt about it. He's former Gamecock assistant, Charleston Southern head coach Stuart Lake joining us, talking about the big news in South Carolina baseball for sure, that Monte Lee is out at Clemson. So, Stuart, from your perspective, you've been part of the South Carolina program. You've been part of the Ole Miss program, big-time college baseball programs. Then you've been the head coach at a smaller program like Charleston Southern. How much influence do athletic directors play in college baseball programs these days?
Well, it's probably hasn't been that much until recently. I'm sorry, my mic messing up on you. I hear it.
You're good.
Okay, I was kind of bouncing back on me. When Skip Bertman took over at LSU, was the first time you'd really started to see the baseball influence. Obviously, we think we do have a Hall of Famer here. So I think the ADs can have influence. So there's a lot of ADs that, they were football guys, and they have to lean on other people to get them, their decisions. So it'll be – I think this Clemson hire is going to be very interesting. I think you're going to see some stuff that me and you may talk about a lot in the next few weeks of the influence other people have on their AD as he tries to make that decision.
Well, Clemson seems to be in kind of the opposite position of South Carolina right now, with stability in the football program and a bunch of success recently, and having kind of doubled down on an embattled basketball coach as opposed to moving on like South Carolina and Frank Martin did with Brad Brownell kind of getting re-up there, I think, to a lot of Clemson fans' dismay in a lot of ways. But now it's the baseball program that will be looking for a new head coach, and will be interesting to see. Mark says Mark Kingston's about to hire Monty as a hitting analyst. LOL. I don't think you're going to see that. And but the connection is crazy. I saw that as a popular deal yesterday on social media. I'm guessing you don't see that happening, huh, Stuart?
No, probably not. I mean, it's not pick on either one of them, because I know they've both been in tough spots. But yeah, I probably don't see that one happening.
So, what kind of timeline are you seeing here? This is a soon after the College World Series at the latest kind of deal, isn't it?
Yeah. There'll be a lot of conversations going on that we'll never be privy to until that person's announced. But again, I feel like the guy that's going to be the next Clemson head coach is going to be a guy that's in a regional, most likely still in a super regional, and then probably in the World Series. That type of coach is what I see them trying to hire. So that goes right up. It could be right at that July 1 when you're trying to see that head coach name.
Will be interesting to follow that situation for sure. Let's get into the NCAA baseball tournament at large. You mentioned a couple of things that stood out to you. The top 16 seeds with a program like East Carolina and Georgia Southern for sure. Tennessee certainly headlining this thing nationally with 53 wins now, rolling through the SEC tournament, and Coastal Carolina being the only team in the state of South Carolina to make this year's NCAA tournament. That to me sticks out, Stuart, that a very proud baseball state like South Carolina has struggled overall. I know the College of Charleston had a good year. Charleston Southern even tried to make a run in the tournament, right? Wofford had a heck of a year. There were teams that had good years, just not quite good enough to get into the NCAA tournament. And then Carolina and Clemson failing to lead the way kind of tells the story this year in the state, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think back to years, gosh, we'd have South Carolina, Clemson, Citadel, College of Charleston during the Coach Pulowski and even Monty's era. Wofford always in Southern Conference has a chance. So there's been years, I don't know what the max, but we might have had 4 or 5 in and not even thought about it. you know, with the way it had gone. So I kind of went back through and looked to see who maybe got snubbed. In my opinion, the one that jumped out to me as soon as it ended Monday was, oh, where did NC State go? And I almost kind of felt like they may have just forgot them in that room and just sort of like, uh-oh. Because, I mean, these guys were 32nd in RPI, 36 wins, and in the ACC championship game. And maybe the human element in me came out. Isn't that it? Maybe deserved it after what happened to them last year. I mean, remember, they're getting ready to play to get in the national championship, and COVID shuts them down, and they're sent home. How in the world can that team be the one we're talking about being snubbed? To me, that the human element in that shouldn't have been overlooked, in my opinion. Some other ones that really jumped out. My son's really good at following this stuff and better than me. Rutgers was 44-15. Well, in RPI, and we hear about RPI, we talk about a lot, 42. So I don't know how they got out. Old Dominion, a team that obviously came here last year, 41-17 in the top 40 RPI. Wofford was 42-16, and ironically ended up one spot in RPI behind Clemson. As remember, Clemson took that game from them early in the year. And then, as you mentioned, the College of Charleston had a heck of a year, 37 wins, won their regular season, and that's the hard part as we call mid-major is you can do all that. You can win from February to May, and if you don't win your tournament, your season, it's like your whole season's determined there, and it was for them. And I hated that for Coach Holbrook and those guys. But those were the snubs that kind of jumped out to me. Did you have any different ones?
No, that's exactly the list. And on the other side, Jan kind of highlighting it. Tell me how Ole Miss deserved to be in as a former Ole Miss assistant. I'm sure that popped out at you a little bit as well.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. My son, we had a tournament this weekend, so we're driving home Monday. We didn't get to watch it live. My wife was kind of texting us stuff. We'd DVR'd it. And they kept saying the SEC got 9 teams. The SEC got 9 teams. And we're, holding our fingers up counting, okay, Tennessee, blah, blah, blah. We're Ole Miss fans, okay? My son it was born there and still tells people he's from Mississippi kind of. We couldn't even come up with Ole Miss ourselves. And then we kind of texted my wife, said, hey, who made it from the SEC? So, Jan, I'm glad they did because of what I think of Coach Bianco and Coach Carl Lafferty. One of their assistants is one of my best friends in just life. So I was certainly excited for them because I don't know what might have happened at Ole Miss if he don't make the tournament. I was hearing rumblings there and may still, who knows, but I don't know. Again, you and I are old enough to realize there's humans in that room. There's no machine in that room. That's why I said I was shocked that an NC State got snubbed. And Coach Bianco's 22 years, I get the best answer for me is the SEC got him in with the RPI and the different things would be the only answer I'd have.
Elliot, Avon's been at NC State for a long time as well, but I saw the criticism on social media yesterday that the lack of ACC representation in the room on the NCAA tournament committee hurt NC State in that one. Do coaches talk like fans do when it comes to stuff like that? It's
funny, yeah. Probably in the last 2 weeks, it's like tournament time. All of us that are in baseball, and thank goodness I still get a bunch of them calling me. Yeah, we're definitely like fans. We're we try to just do it in conversation instead of text because there's some what is that or what is going on here, and that's why I tell you yesterday my phone was blowing up with people just disappointed for mine. Again, no one's shocked that Clemson made a move. I mean, they're Clemson. But we were just all like, dang, he's a guy that we all liked and a guy. But, yeah, we're calling each other on that Monday afternoon going, again, how did Ole Miss get in? We're trying to figure it out. You try to figure it out in case you're, quote, Ole Miss next year, how you can get in. But I do think we need to give more credit to what Coach Gilmore and those guys do at Coastal. I think every year they kind of just get in the tournament, and it's almost like, yeah, they should have been. Well, South Carolina Clemson ain't. So why sometimes we've just taken Coastal for granted. They won the national championship in the Big South. I mean, if you're ever going to make a movie on college baseball, that's it. I mean, that would be like I I don't even know how to compare a football team to winning the national championship because that level don't even get to play in it. So to what Coach Gilmore's done, and a lot of people forgot he was kind of got USC Aiken rolling back in the late 80s and early 90s, and they've continued to be a program. I just don't think he and the other guys there get ever enough credit for what they do at Coastal.
If you're Graham Neff, you give Gary Gilmore a call?
I think you would, but I know Coach Gilmore, and I know the house he has right on the ocean now. I don't think he's going to commute to Clemson, but I guarantee you this, and if I'm Graham Neff, I'm calling every guy that I can, like a Gary Gilmore, to nothing else, say, who's your list? Who do you think? How did you – I'm driving down there. Not a bad road trip anyway. How in the world did you turn this program into this? Because when I was at Charleston Southern. Coastal was clearly the top of the Big South, and then Liberty with Coach Tolman was next. His office was a trailer. I mean, this was 2010 and 12. Remember, South Carolina beat Coastal. Coastal had to play at the Pro Park. They couldn't even host the Super Regional at their stadium. That was 2010. For what he's done, I'd be down there, and I always was when we played them. I was writing down notes. I was trying to figure out how in the world he created this. But the bottom line would always go back to he always had really, really good players. And what he's been able to do is get those guys that maybe everybody wasn't recruiting and get them in school, get them there, keep them for 2-3 years. And that's how they've won so much.
Yeah, that knack for being able to recruit to your job, to me, is 90% of college coaching in a lot of ways. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I've learned it more, Tim, this year being away from it because I've got to visit people and not them think I'm stealing, a game plan or talking to me. I got to go down when I did those radio games to talk to coaches before games, and they knew I wasn't going to, go back up and give our other team, whatever. That is, I think you've nailed it. Guys, I think guys that understand where they're at, and I always tried to be that guy at Charleston Southern, and I'm proud of the teams we had, understand what you're recruiting your kids to. It's more than just baseball at some schools. Coastal, obviously, yeah, you got the beach right there, but you got a great environment. Look what Coach Chadwell's done in football right there. I mean, those guys are playing in bowl games, and I know that football staff personally from my years, but I think you nailed it. And if you ever see me get to stumble back into coaching again, I can guarantee you I'll say that constantly. Let's recruit the guys that fit here. I thought that's what Coach Tanner, Coach Tolman, Coach Myers, all them guys, and Coach Calvi as he came in, Coach Lee, all of us always knew. We knew this was such a special place. I think when people walked away, they felt it. I felt that that's what does it to you.
A follow-up on that one then, Stuart, is how much does a place define the culture or the type of player that you need to get in there, and how much does a coach define that? You know what I'm saying? Because he's a hell of a coach. I think we all know that. What he did at College of Charleston, he seemed to have that thing going. He was getting the right guys in there. They were doing what they needed to do. He's over at Super Regionals, just a game away from the College World Series. Yeah. Then at Clemson, it didn't work. Jack Leggett, it did work at Clemson. Ray Tanner did work at Carolina. And I'm wondering, how much does a place define that, an administration, maybe an athletics department, and then how much does a coach define that from the baseball perspective? I think baseball, probably compared to other programs, is more coach dependent, I would put it, if I'm doing percentages from the outside looking in. What about you?
Well, I think the head coach certainly in baseball, maybe even more than football, is really, he sets what it's going to be about. There's no question about that. And you look back, and it's so hard, to compare. Gosh, if Monte stays at College Charleston, they may be at Cal State Fullerton of the East Coast. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, like you said, they were a game away from going to the World Series there. And I don't know. I remember when I look back, and all I can ever do is my experiences. When I was here in the early 2000s, Dr. Mike McGee was AD, and he was like a dude. And then you had Coach Tanner, there was no excuse. It was just a cool time to be in. And I think Graham Neff at Clemson, and I don't know him at all, I know kind of where he's been, he's going to have to establish what he wants. And I guess he decided that wasn't mine. I'm not going to go back there, but he's going to have to figure out, because you made a great point. He's 37,
38.
Well, the coaches in my mind that he's going to hire, they're going to be 10 years older than him. And the guys that I would envision he'd want to hire, they're not going to really be guys that like to get called over to the AD's office a lot to hang out. They're going to be guys that have been running programs and established programs for a long time. So I think if I could, that's going to be a kind of an odd dynamic to watch. Is he going to be comfortable? We talked about Slosh at A&M. Well, Slosh is older than me. I'm 50, so he's probably 54, 55. I don't know the AD at Texas A&M, but obviously he was comfortable enough. Bring in Jimbo Fisher. Now you get a strong personality in baseball. It's going to be up to that AD of how he can handle it, because that's going to be a big part of their hire. I forgot Cliff Godwin's name at East Carolina. I think Cliff Godwin has embraced that program maybe more than any guy right now in the country at East Carolina, because he played there when it meant so much at East Carolina. Everybody keeps saying his name. I still don't know if he'll leave East Carolina. You got to realize those guys are getting paid well too, because one of my buddies said, well, Clemson will pay him more. Well, we don't know he's getting paid at East Carolina. And to be comfortable and live and be around, that means a lot too. There's a price tag on that part. So this would be kind of cool for me to watch over the next few weeks to kind of see what Graham Neff feels comfortable with. And again, I think they're going to go for a home run kind of hire.
And then that means they'll have to pay for it, I assume. And then that means the pressure is ratcheted up from the outside, or the expectation of the whole thing. Are baseball guys less willing, you think, to make that move just by nature, knowing it's a little bit more laid back game and all the different factors that go into it? Or do you think baseball coaches are just like pretty much all of us, and if you get a better opportunity, you got to take it?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of I remember sitting in Coach Tanner's office back in the 90s. He had just got his first raise to make six figures. And he said, Stu, this game, man, we're going to be just like football here in a few years. If they're going to pay us like this, they're going to fire us. Well, if I'm correct, I think Coach Tanner might have retired making seven figures. So that number in that 12 years, you can just see how drastically people start to realize we can pay coaches. I think you have a hard time pulling guys out of comfortable areas, but there's a group of guys, the Schlossnagels, I can name them, that challenge is going to be exciting to do it. And you look at it, you go in there 5 years and you're going to pay you like some of them are getting paid. There's guys making 1.5, 1.6 million now coaching college baseball. So do that time 4 or 5. That's worth the challenge to a lot of them to try.
Yeah, I cannot. I mean, it's obvious there, but are there names out there that are unrealistic Clemson fans even consider? Pops to mind the Vanderbilt coach. It seems like a big time name would be a home run hire, obviously, but completely unrealistic that he would leave Vanderbilt right now for anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think Coach Corbin will. I respect him so much, but I think there's still, this is me on the outside, I think there's still some animosity from the old school Clemson guys, the way it all ended with Coach Leggett. And I just don't see them wanting to come back, maybe even yet. But
Kevin Sullivan is the other name connected.
Kevin Sullivan, yeah. And I just don't see those guys doing it. Now, Coach Corbin, he is Vanderbilt baseball. I mean, we talked about it one time. The first, 6 years of my career, we never lost to Vanderbilt in the SEC. And now to think he's just one of the elite teams, and for what he's done there in Nashville itself, I don't see him ever really leaving Vanderbilt, to be honest with you. I don't.
Sounds like your dog might be messing with you over there.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get him to put him on out. Yeah.
Your former hitters are all about, hey, you got to focus in. Doesn't matter on the pressure.
I know.
You got to do it.
I know. Well, I got Hayden out cutting grass and my wife in the back with earplugs in. So I think I'm the only one in the house that hears him doing this Sammy Davis Jr. across the floor on me. So we'll get him out. But I'm locked back in. But no, when you talk of those type coaches, and I really didn't think Schlossnagle would leave TCU. Sure. To remember, I mean, he had created that program. When I was coaching at College of Charleston, Coach Schlossnagle was the head coach at UNLV. I don't even know if people remember he coached at UNLV. He was a manager in college. He never played college baseball. He was a manager who just listen to everything that was going on, and I love to hear his story a lot of times. And he's probably Schlossnagle and the most CEO type college baseball coach going right now, where he's really there as I'm running this business. I'm the motivational guy. I got my pitching coach doing this, hitting coach doing that, recruiting guy doing that. And I think you're going to see that trend kind of continue if they're able to get the right people with them. That's easy to say you're going to be a CEO.
Right.
It's just really hard to get the people that allow you to be a CEO. And he was fortunate enough to do that.
Well, and then when things start going a little sideways, right? Then it's your job as the CEO to make some tweaks or make sure everybody, and then I can go sideways real quick. Jan weighing in with some details here. You mentioned East Carolina and Cliff Godwin. Jan says he's making $415.
Yeah,
Carolina, and you got to believe that Clemson could double that at the Power 5 job. Do you see those numbers differently? Do we not get the full story? I know we don't get the full story for volunteer coaches and the whole thing. They obviously are not volunteer coaches and can make money different ways. How do you see salaries when they're attached to coaches? You see them just like the rest of us, or differently?
Well, I mean, you got to take into, he could be getting, obviously, camps, and their college coaches right now making over, multiple $100,000 from their camps that you don't see. There's other things that they could have attached, the media stuff to it. Most of the time with state jobs, we know what the school's paying, but I would venture to guess Cliff's got a little more than that going in the checking account every year. But to say that the money Clemson could offer wouldn't make him consider it, I would think he'd definitely have to if he's a guy and I don't know how he wouldn't be for what he's been able to do up there as a head coach.
And how would you see the response there? Because from where I'm sitting, East Carolina would do everything they could to keep him, to keep their program where it is. I understand their ceiling is probably lower than Clemson's. I get that, but I would think they would come right back, or they're probably doing it right now. I mean, let's be honest. They're definitely doing it right now. There's an agent involved, and most likely they're trying to lock up their head coach. I'm sure their programs across the country, you mentioned Georgia Southern, I'm sure talking to their head coach about extending the contract, making sure he's going to be part of the program as well.
Yeah, the thing that hurts the East Carolinas and Georgia Southern, that Clemson and South Carolina, they just don't get the conference money. We forget a lot of times because we all want to move on so fast, but COVID made a huge hit into, and East Carolina, to me, is bigger than mid-major, but it made a huge hit on their economies. So I don't know, to be honest with you, if this is a time where East Carolina can stick its chest out and say, we'll match it, because COVID was a big deal to those schools. I mean, and just losing attendance and losing money and all that. So they don't have TV money coming in like the SEC and ACC to kind of keep you going when those weird times came through. So I'm certain that my gut, knowing Cliff Godwin, what will keep him there if it does, is that dude loves East Carolina. And he loves it where he lives because that's where he grew up. And he said many, many times, and I just remember how emotional he got either last year or the year before, I don't ever want to leave here till I take this program to the World Series. So he had positioned himself. Unfortunately for him, I was kind of looking, if they win their regional, they host, but they'll match up against Texas, who I still thought, you play them 2 out of 3 times, you don't know. I can imagine Texas's hitters in that little park at East Carolina. So there's no easy path, even though he's a national 8 seed to Omaha. But I've seen him I really don't think the guy wants to leave until he can put East Carolina in the World Series. If that happens, and as Jan said, you start talking about doubling guys' salaries and, that type thing, then you got to consider it.
So you touched on it right there, Stuart. Let's get into more of the tournament at large, if you don't mind. You got the bracket in front of you or some notes in front of you?
I got some notes. I don't have the bracket in front of me as far as where every team's at, but I really went in this morning to look at that top 16 and how they match up, although it won't be perfect when they match up, but that's kind of what I got with me. I'll be glad. Let's roll through them.
Okay, what sticks out to you? Where of those top 16 seeds, I guess, where would you put your money for one of those top 16 not getting out of their regional? Why don't we start there? Which another way to ask that is, I guess, the nicer way to ask that. Where's the strongest regional out there, kind of top to bottom, and maybe it's 2 or 3 seed?
I think one that's going to be really fun to watch is that Southern Miss Regional. They're 11 national seed, but they've got LSU coming in there who will travel. And I've said it before, Hattiesburg, it was the hardest place I've ever gone as a coach to coach. It is, I don't even know how to describe it. So that setting for what they're going to have. Southern Miss came to our regional one year at Ole Miss and traveled in like it was theirs. And unfortunately for us, our tickets bought most of our fans bought most of the tickets. But I think Southern Miss is going to have a hard time. I think LSU was hot as they were finishing their year. And that's one kind of in the middle of the pack that to me is going to be a matchup. And they're matched up with Miami. That Miami regional is not going to be easy. They're going to deal with weather. And then you got an Ole Miss team down there that's going to try to prove they belong. Who knows? Maybe trying to fight for Coach Bianco's job. That'll be a regional I'm tuning into a lot. And then I'm interested. I've been in the role of Tennessee when we were 50-6 going into that regional. I'm curious, how does Tennessee just take the role of you're supposed to win, but you still got to win, and as they go through it? Then they're matched up with Georgia Southern, who's the 16 seed. So we'll see how all that's going to go.
Well, that was another one that I saw national chatter about, the fact that Notre Dame didn't get to host, and they're going to that Georgia Southern regional. I think a lot of people put that Georgia Southern at the top of their list. First of all, they're the number 16 seed. Secondly, they got a big-time program like Notre Dame that is more of a proven powerhouse for sure. And that's what I wanted to ask you. You were touching on it there a little bit. How much does it matter to a team and a program this time of year that it has been done before by those that came before them, as opposed to a team that hasn't proven it nearly as much? This dawned on me as you're talking about Southern Miss.
Well, it's hard. Gosh, I look back. I mean, we rolled into that Lafayette Super Regional, but we hadn't been to the World Series since 1985.
Right.
So all of us, I remembered it, but I was 12 years old. It was hard to get over that hump here. Then we go to Stanford the next year, lose again in the third game. And you start to think, even in South Carolina, God, are we ever going to get back? So when you are that Southern Miss, and Southern Miss went to the World Series a few years ago, but with another head coach, I think it's very important. But I guarantee you they were looking, Georgia Southern was not jumping up and down that Notre Dame's coming to their regional. They probably would have rather just had some Georgia teams in there that they played and their kids all knew and would get it. But yeah, it's certainly once you get there, and South Carolina proved that so many times, because when we finally got there in 2002, you went again in 2003, again in 2004, had the period between it, but then in 10, 11, 12. So it gets in your mind that this is what you're supposed to do. And that's where I was always so impressed with Coach Burtman at LSU, is they always knew what they were supposed to do. And they were able to do it.
Reminds me of the line I asked Lou Holtz one time. Would he prefer a team that had been winning to lose the week before he played that team or program, or would he prefer them to keep on winning? He said, you want them to keep doing what they've been doing. You don't want the exception, right? It's basically momentum. And in football, we see it all the time, right? Good luck if you play Alabama the week after they played Texas A&M and got beat, right? One of those things.
Right.
You could feel it, Stuart. I could feel it just being around the program in 2003 and 2004, and then 2010 moving forward, that confidence is tangible in those moments. And it's also the other thing. It's that look of doubt in the other team's eyes when they're looking at each other. If they haven't done it before, I don't think you can't really put a price tag on it or a thumb on it necessarily, but I think the value is massive when it comes to college baseball this time of year.
Well, I do too, and I've been on the wrong end of a lot of those. I was fortunate enough to coach in about 6 or 7 super regionals, and we only got there once. So I mean, but in that other dugout was, I get to Ole Miss, we're looking across in 2005, and there sits Augie Garrido on his chair at Ole Miss, and we're like, I'm going to be honest with you, you see Texas, and you're an Ole Miss team that had just never been to Omaha at that point, and you're going, oh, God, we got to beat them, and we lose in game 3. The next year, we're looking across at Miami, a team that all of us have grown up seeing in the College World Series and dogpiling, and they get us in game 3, and then Ole Miss years later gets to Omaha by going on the road and beating the Lafayette team, and I've asked them, they said they just didn't see, Goliath sitting in that dugout, and it helps. So you're exactly right. It matters who's in that dugout, and when you feel it, and I've been a part of it at South Carolina, that wave of momentum, you didn't care. You didn't think anybody was in that dugout better than you once that momentum started over those years.
Tennessee seems to be a bit of an exception here with how they've played this year. Not necessarily the results, but also the swagger they bring to the game. You saw it firsthand the last several years, and Tony Vitello, what has he done to that program, for that program, with that program that has gotten this ridiculous run now, ridiculously successful? I mean,
it was a joke. When his first year we played him and we got back home, I talked to Coach Tanner. I said, he reminds me of Van Horn when Van Horn was at Nebraska. Remember in 2002?
Sure.
Coach Van Horn hadn't gone on to Arkansas. He went that following year. And Coach Tanner said, I don't know if he's that good. I said, I think this guy might be a superstar. Here's why. I could stand by his dugout when we played him, and I could just hear the way they interacted with him and the way he said things in that dugout that I'm thinking, boy, if he gets good players in here, which now they've got really some good players in here, I think this guy's going to really win. And the thing he does is we kind of said CEO earlier, he kind of just kept being the recruiting guy. He went out and hired an older pitching guy. And we all watch the games. He don't have nothing to do with it. He'll join in an argument every so often because his guy really likes to get into it, but that's his. And then he went out and got a hitting guy and said, here, this is what I want the offense to look like, but I want to keep recruiting. Two things have jumped out to me funny about him at Tennessee. He got thrown out one year before we came, and he went and set up and sold lemonade right outside the stadium, which to me just showed a lot of just who you are. Then this year, you remember he had the ejection for the, quote, bumping the umpire. He went on campus, and for $2, students could pay him to get chest bumped, and all the money went to a charity. I just think he's brought that whole environment. We always know Tennessee's a football school. Even when they're not good, they want to be a football school. He has made Tennessee baseball fun from, March to now. That place is going to be chaotic. I am going to be curious, just how do you handle we've been there. How do you handle just you're supposed to win every game and everybody thinks you're going to win by 4 or 5. That ain't going to happen. So it'll be curious to me to see, but I think he's a name you'll be talking about for a long, long time in college baseball.
Well, this year is going to be a year, if they keep it going, that is talked about for a long, long time. It already is. You go 53-7 and roll through the SEC. They won it by 6 games or something, and they roll through the SEC tournament. It looks like their route to the College World Series as the number 1 overall seed seems to be about as good as you could draw up. Georgia Tech, I think, is the 2, Campbell the 3, and they'll start with Alabama State in their regional. And again, they match up with the Statesboro regional with Georgia Southern hosting Notre Dame, Texas Tech, and UNC Greensboro. So that one is one to keep an eye on, I think, for sure, from a favorite standpoint, living up to the pressure, and then who might emerge in that Georgia Southern one. Notre Dame, keep an eye on for sure. Other ones that kind of the Texas A&M TCU thing is fascinating. And you mentioned the 2000 Louisiana Lafayette. They're just Louisiana, I guess. Now they're the 3rd seed there with TCU. Let me say this. How much is the public perception of coaches playing former places? How accurate is it typically, or is it usually pretty accurate, or are there underlying feelings there most of the time that just don't come out publicly?
Yeah, I don't think much will come out, and I don't think the players will be as bitter that he left TCU to go to Texas A&M, but there definitely be some weird feelings. Again, that's why I said there's no way you sit in a room and don't realize that you're putting TCU and Texas A&M regional. And then they come out and go, oh, it just worked out with the metrics, put them there. No, that was let's see how that is and create some interest for this regional. But I really don't in this situation, the details I have of it, I don't think it was such a negative split or everybody couldn't believe you did it. I think it's in that state, Texas is still Texas, but Texas A&M is surely close to them right now and what they're doing. So I think everybody kind of understood that move that he made.
Victor Roach. You remember that name? Jan asking about the slugger that had about 30 homers at Georgia Southern during the Omaha runs back in 2011-ish or so. You know whatever happened to that guy, he's asking?
I don't know what happened to him, but I can give you a great Victor Roach story. We're beating Georgia Southern that year at Charleston Southern, a midweek game by about 6 or 8 runs. And I had a kid on my team that I wanted to get in. He's now a scout for the Detroit Tigers. He gets mad when I tell this story. Got George Schaefer. So my pitching coach looks at me as they're starting to scratch back in it, and that's that year Roach had hit these home runs. And he said, "Coach, you want to get George on out?" I said, "Nah." I said, "Let's see what happens with George throwing to Victor Roach." Well, let me tell you, I almost lost a scoreboard. The reason I didn't is the ball cleared it. I definitely think a squirrel, or maybe it sounded even like a chipmunk, took it in the woods. And it's the hardest ball in my career I've ever seen hit. And it was the year, Tim, that no one was hitting home runs. And I remember, and their same coach is still there, Rodney Henning. And I went up to Rodney after the game. I said, "I'm not," and by the way, we ended up blowing the game and lost. I said, "I'm not accusing him of cheating. What is in his bat is different?" And we both were laughing. He's like, "Stuart, strongest kid I've ever coached." But I don't think Victor Roach ever made it to the big leagues. I do think he had a career in minor league baseball, but still to this day, hardest hit ball I've ever seen in person was the one he hit off of us at Charleston Southern.
Good stuff. Good stuff about Victor Roach. That's a name I hadn't heard of or thought of in a long, long time. Thanks for the question there, Jan. Wanted to touch on the other story in the state of South Carolina right now. Clemson firing Monte Lee, certainly the headline yesterday. The next sub-story with Coastal Carolina being the only team in the NCAA tournament in Division I is what Landon Powell, Trey Dyson and company are doing in North Greenville, the number 1 seed going into the Division II tournament for the first time ever. They push through and make the Division II College World Series. I know for a guy that knows Landon pretty well, knows Trey pretty well, you got to be pretty proud of what that program's doing, huh?
I'm very proud. And don't forget, Matt Williams is on that coaching staff too. So, I mean, really their whole coaching staff. I was able to coach Landon 3 years. Trey Dyson, I coached, I think I told his wife it felt like 14 years because I got I was a high school coach and coached Trey in an all-star game, and then we go to South Carolina. We're there together for 4 years. So your segment with him last week with his sunglasses on talking about why we hadn't won at
SEC tournament
at Hoover, I literally was laughing and felt like I was about 28 years old listening to him when he was a player. I don't know if you've ever known stories on Trey that Coach Tanner would let him have the mic after wins. And if we could have just recorded the stuff he would do, a Rodney Dangerfield act, and he came up with a nickname for every guy on our team. And as you get on the bus, he'd call out your nickname and they'd all chant it. Just Landon. People forget Landon's story. Landon left high school early. Gilreath did it. And when Gilreath was doing it, I told him, I said, "Hey, I got to be honest, one of the greatest players I ever coached struggled doing this." Landon Powell came in that year. Timmy Whitaker hit 20-some home runs. Landon hardly ever caught. He caught the Sunday games his freshman spring and then he became, I think, one of the greatest players in the history of our program. And to go on and do what he did in the big leagues. And then Matt Williams, just a huge part of our run to that super regional. I tell him all the time, the catch he made on the Thursday night at Arkansas when we were scuffling to figure out who we were and went on that big run, he was in right field. And he had to make a catch in front of about 8,000 people. And when it was over that night getting on the bus, I said, "Hey, you ever made a bigger catch?" He goes, "I don't even remember playing the outfield before." So, I mean, it was that big a play. So they had tremendous makeup in their dugout. And they needed it because Columbus State hit like a walk-off in game 2.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're just about to go, "Oh, God, here we go again." So I was following them. And then for the World Series to be in Cary, North Carolina, where Landon's from, I mean, honestly, I didn't even realize that until we were kind of figuring it out. It's awesome. I was texting them that day with every emoji I could find to say congratulations. And they were, Trey especially was right back with me because he's just one of the coolest guys you ever meet. So I'm so excited for them. And they're the number one seed in it, by the way, too. So they didn't stumble into the D2 World Series. They're going in with a chance to win this thing.
Yeah, if you want to see some of their own reaction, they popped on with us from the office, showing off the hardware. Of course, Trey had the trophies lined up with one of their players, Pat Monteith, and then Landon popped on talking to his buddy Scott Eisberg a little bit. I'm wondering, from your perspective, you mentioned high school, but it was straight to D1 for you from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it was.
So how does D2 college baseball compare to Division I from your perspective? I mentioned it the other day, a few miles an hour less, maybe on the mound. Maybe it was an academic issue that kept a guy going a lot of times. I've seen a lot of Division II baseball, and I can tell you it ain't far off from what you see in Omaha.
Well, it especially isn't far off anymore. A lot of times what you see is just guys that got overlooked. You said it. There's some guys that maybe academically, but the biggest thing is what you see in Division II baseball at times. You see guys get after it. You and I talked about it last week. Sometimes guys at Division I level, like once they got there, they can just kind of throw their glove out. Well, we can see that ain't happening with the transfer portal anymore. But I don't think there's a big difference anymore. Division II baseball, we live up here. Newberry College is right near us. Lander is near us. We go to those games. USC Aiken's only an hour or so away. And obviously Landon and them just up the road. There's some great Division II. I think Wingate won the World Series last year, which is just right up in North Carolina. But then you go, and here's the big kicker. Go look at big league rosters. You know, we're all proud of the SEC and obviously the ACC. But you go look at big league rosters, there's dudes from all over Division II baseball, established big leaguers from those schools. So it's great baseball. When it's all said and done, the memories of the dugout and the road trips and the wins and losses, man, the one after, D1, D2, that don't matter. I mean, it is great baseball. And what I hope D2 can do more is get more access where we can see their games. Where the ESPN Plus, I can sit and watch Charleston Southern games. I can sit and watch USC Upstate games. But if I want to see North Greenville, beside maybe a one-camera setup behind on plate, so I hope as the future of college baseball grows, I hope those athletic departments realize you want to get more students and do some advertising. Baseball is a great way to do it.
Yeah, and especially with technology being what it is these days, it's a lot easier. I'm thinking, I haven't seen a way. If I find a way, we'll talk to our buddies there at North Greenville. If there is a way, we'll figure out how to get the word out about being able to watch what's going down. Sunday at 6, I think, is when North Greenville starts the Division II College World Series, and a lot of Carolina connections. A lot of people in South Carolina I know pulling for Landon Powell, North Greenville, and the Crusaders from that standpoint. All right, 1 to 2. We talked a bunch of baseball, and obviously it merits that this time of year. Now, last time you were on with us, you were wearing your Cleveland Browns hat. And I've asked you how, as a Carolina guy, first of all, you can welcome in a Clemson quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Well, it ain't just a Carolina-Clemson thing that you got to kind of rationalize or wrap your brain around with Deshaun Watson. The latest headline is it's another charge, unfortunately, and it's not comfortable to talk about. It's not fun to talk about, but it is part of the equation these days. What is it, a 23rd civil suit, I think, filed against Deshaun Watson I was reading about today. How, as a Browns fan, are you looking at all this stuff? Because from the Carolina Panthers perspective, that's how I saw the Deshaun Watson situation there with Houston. I thought he was destined to become a Panther with what their quarterback situation was. And then all the legal stuff popped up. The Browns went all in with him. They're making him the guy. How do you look at this from a Browns fan perspective, sir?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you and I know we certainly won't make light of the charges and that, whether we say a joke or not in this or not. But as an NFL fan, and I'm a huge NFL fan, I would hope certainly they've got a better grasp of this than they're letting us have. Because from a distance, I'm shocked at how long, one, that they let him sign such a huge deal with the Browns. 2, how this just keeps going. And remember, just 2 weeks ago, the commissioner said they were close to letting us know what they were going to do.
Yeah, I think they met. He was supposed to meet with the commissioner and the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and then they put some of the deposition actually was made public where you could hear what had been. I was reading this morning on this. One of the claim, one person dropped the charges, another picked it up. A bizarre thing in this to me, it made me feel like a Seinfeld episode in this. There's only one lawyer.
Right.
Only one lawyer's representing all of these people. I'm just picturing that guy from Seinfeld, being the lawyer. He gets 35% of whatever they settle. I'm like, it's just so many bizarre plays. They let them go to the Bahamas. That was the NFL jumped all over that. They were showing that on their website, how Deshaun Watson took the offense and, traveled to the Bahamas. You just got to think there's things we don't know. But now come back to a Cleveland Browns fan. I mean, I think it'd be devastating if you say, hey, yeah, you got him, you can't play. But still, again, Baker Mayfield. It's really weird that you're not hearing anything on him.
Right.
I mean,
it's almost like the insurance policy. Right?
Yeah, it's like I'm certain, just as we talk about who Clemson's going to hire as a baseball coach or whatever, there's people that know what's going on way more than we will. But this is, unfortunately, as people will tell me as a Browns fan, this has been very Brown-like in the way all this stuff's been handled. So,
this latest one, I was reading about it today. I thought the interesting part was they pointed out that the not offering or looking for the minimum dollar amount in this thing and just filed this thing to basically say that Deshaun Watson was in the wrong. And this particular woman saw something, I think, on the latest HBO show, Inside Sports, where there were a couple of other accusers, and I think maybe Deshaun Watson had responded or his lawyers responded in the whole thing, and it just ticked her off, is how I read it. And so she went ahead and came public here. It's so messy, right? I mean, so much money is involved, right? Deshaun Watson is worth so much money. We all understand that. And then what he's being accused of is absolutely awful as well. It just makes me sad all the way around. There are no winners here. And I don't think Deshaun Watson, even if he's cleared legally, which he was cleared criminally already in the state of Texas, I guess. I don't know if this ever separates, if he can ever separate from this completely, or people will ever look at him the same.
Well, the one reason, and I don't either, but let's not forget now with the Ravens, when they won a Super Bowl, we all seem to forget what their linebacker had done a few years earlier. So, not to mention, I obviously don't like the Ravens at all as a Braves fan. But why I say that is you kind of move on if you win, and that's what's disappointing for me. Just on a sports side, is I think the Browns have a super team, and I'd be really disappointed if you brought someone in where you have the talent that they had to maybe win, and it's become more about. We're sitting here talking about things that neither one of us are comfortable. We'd rather be talking about football and different stuff. So I would think the NFL's got to sort it out soon. I mean, they're going to be going into their camp in less than a month.
Right.
They're already having their practices. So,
and that brings it back around. And let's get back around to the Clemson situation, the college baseball situation, what we brought up. In Monte Lee, I've had some personal interaction with him. I'm kind of encouraged to see it. What I saw yesterday on social media, maybe the human reaction to the news. I know that you always get that segment of fans out there say good riddance, didn't win enough, blah, 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 that don't look at players or coaches as human beings and only treat them as their entertainment, objects. But I think we might be doing a better job, or maybe it just says a lot about who Monte Lee is and all the relationships he has in the state of South Carolina. What do you think, Stuart, from the coaching perspective, having been there, been coaching third base and been on the receiving end of fans' attitudes towards, or disappointment, frustration, all of that stuff. Now where we are in 2022.
Yeah, well, we'll speak about the Clemson one. I think it says about him. It says also about their assistant coaches too. That was just a staff that. Monty's from Lugoff. So, I mean, he's from right around here. He's from our state, which really none of the coaches had been. I mean, he is one of our own. But I think his coaching staff were good guys. I mean, I was fortunate enough with Hayden this year. We got to go up to a Clemson winter camp, and everybody picked on me and said, why would you take your son to Clemson camp? I said, I took my son to Monte Lee's camp. Because I liked his staff. I liked him. I liked what they preached, how they did it. And we had a great time. It was my It was my son's first time really getting to go to Clemson because we just, in his whole life, never been there. No reason to take him to hear me get yelled at. He could do that at home. So he just always had never gone. It was just, so I think what you're seeing on the human side with this, I'm going to tell you, Tim, throughout the spring, I've been getting to do scouting stuff for different organizations. I've never had so many scouts say to me as it was trending down, man, I hope there's some way he survives. Because usually scouts are just, they're black and white. Hey, you don't win enough, you're out. The old school guy. It's probably one of the most unique situations I'd seen where it was like, us standing a lot of times going, hey, how could he stay? What could he do? And we weren't, obviously none of that worked out, but I think it says more about him and his staff than the era of social media by far.
So I guess as you were talking, then I'm thinking kind of what's next for a lifetime South Carolina guy, right? Played at the College of Charleston, has coached in South Carolina. You mentioned from Lugoff. What about the idea, since you went through it, right? Assistant coach to head coach, back to assistant. How does that work? How do you go about that evaluation process, having been a head coach? From the outside looking in, we say, well, there are head coaches and there are assistants, but really they're coaches, right? Yeah. And it depends on maybe the situation, the whole thing. How do you see where he's at and how he's going to evaluate things moving forward?
I think he could be either one. Monte and I talked so many times, especially when I was the head coach at Charleston Southern. He was at College of Charleston. Well, Coach Jordan was at Citadel. We ran maybe the only camp in the country. All three schools did. We did a 3-school camp every summer, and it was awesome. Where maybe Thursday the CSU staff ran it on CSU campus. Then we all moved to the college the next day, and his staff ran it, and the next day Citadel ran it. Monte was what I am. We enjoyed a lot talking about. It's fun being an assistant because you are the guy that when I was a head coach, I couldn't go in the cage, with that one guy for every day because the other guys would go, well, look like we know who his favorite is. But as an assistant coach, I could go in the cage with Andrew Eister every day for that certain time. No one went, well, that's his favorite. No, because I'd go in the cage with another guy 30 minutes later or meet another guy after practice. I loved being an assistant. And that was what Monte and I talked a lot about. It was fun being a head coach because you didn't have to ask anybody once you made your decision. That part was fun, and getting paid a little more. But I mean, I could see him being either one, and he would be a fit in either one because real coaches remember what we're coaches. I mean, we're about player development in college. We're not in pro baseball. We're not, at their final step in their career. We're hopefully that next step that sends them on to minor league and the big league. So that's the part of it. We're both. And I think it's because, as I told you, Coach Tanner only had so many coaches during his era. There was a guy, Trip Keister, that started it all off. I followed Trip. I stayed for 4 or 5 years, and Monte stayed 4 or 5 years, and then Sammy came in. That was it. And in that role at South Carolina, I'll get in one good volunteer for you can get me. In that role, Coach Tanner, I'm telling you, I've told people I coached as much in the, quote, volunteer role at South Carolina as I ever did in any role ever. Because you got the volunteer at South Carolina worked in his office. So Coleman had his office. Calvi had an office when he came. Coach Myers had an office. But the volunteer had a table in Coach Tanner's office. So you heard everything. You heard contract negotiation. You heard scheduling. You heard him and Dr. McGee arguing over whatever. You heard everything. That's why I think all of us that got to serve in that role. Tripp's now a AA manager in the Phillies organization. I think Monte and I and Sammy have gone on to have some success. And I always thought it's because we got to sit in there and see it all. And that's why I said wherever he lands, he'll be able to do either one. He'll be fine. So
do you consider yourself a head coach or assistant coach, or is it just coach?
Me as a coach. I mean, I really do. If I get to do this again, I just want to be with guys that I love getting there with every day. That's really my goal is if that comes up again. I mean, I probably almost daily still talk to Jim Tourney. Or when I really need a laugh, I'll call Coach Myers because he's going to say something that – but, again, I call the Trey Dyson. It's just the baseball. I miss the day-to-day. I do not miss losing. I coached this weekend Hayden's travel team, and the kid hit a walk-off home run to beat us, and I'm going, damn, I didn't miss that at all. Even at that little bit of a level, I don't miss losing. And to be honest, winning was more of a relief at South Carolina or Ole Miss. It's not arms in the air celebrating wins. It's almost a relief. What I miss is that day-to-day. As we sat here talking, Andrew Eister's called me on the phone. I just missed every day of getting in there at 8:30, seeing who's kind of in the training room or weight room and starting your day with a smart aleck comment or a story and laughing and doing that until you, gosh, back in the day, all our wives would be calling like, hey, are you coming home? Because we would sit around ridiculously after games to just sit and talk and tell stories, and someone would pop up after a game, a former player. That's the stuff I really miss. And
was it this time of year that you remember the most fondly as well, or not necessarily?
No, I do. This was what you'd work for. It felt like when you made it to the SEC tournament, you could exhale, because back in the day, it was only 8 teams. And if you made it, you pretty much had a chance you were in a regional. We always tried to win. I laugh at how people say South Carolina stinks, and we did. It wasn't on purpose. I swear to God, we weren't trying to lose games. I mean, and then the one year, 2002, we made a run right to the championship. I think we ended up losing to maybe it was Alabama or Mississippi State or somebody, but it wasn't on purpose. This was fun. Your practices were short. I mean, because we already never had really long practices with Coach Tanner, but at this point, the NCAA would start telling you when you got there, you only have an hour and 15 minutes. Everything was baseball guys are itinerary guys, so everything was stretch here, this, that. No, it was fun. This is if you're a college baseball coach right now, even as hard as it is when you lose. And I never got to finish the year with a win. We made it to a national championship game, but we lost. Every part of this is fun, because you're going to be going to different places. And, I look at the Miami regional again. I bring it up. Coach Couch is at Arizona that was here last year. So they're sending them all the way there. Ole Miss is there. Well, his daughter was a rebel girl for Ole Miss for 5 years. So, I mean, it's just weird how all baseball kind of comes back together if you'll allow it and allow yourself to create these relationships. And, I promise you, when they crank up Friday, I'll have the TV on and locked in and looking at my phone, trying to keep up with scores.
Yeah, just looking more at that Miami regional, assuming it ever gets played, but with the weather concerns. Arizona, Ole Miss, the 2-3 game there with the number 6 national seed Miami with Canisius. And that's what I love, too, about this time of year. You get these programs that, half of them don't even know they play baseball, right? Southeast Missouri or Central Michigan, for instance, and they'll sneak up. Every single year, it seems to happen on a Friday night or a Thursday night, whenever these regionals start, that one of these top seeds in a regional gets knocked off and has to fight their way back through the losers bracket. Now, a lot of times they're good enough and deep enough to do it, but to me, it's such a unique part of the regional setup. And like you mentioned, 4 schools coming together in an area. That's what I loved about the College World Series, right? It was unlike anything else. You got 8 fan bases coming in to the College World Series. Well, you get a little taste of that with these regionals. You get half of that, and it's just such a unique environment. So fun for the fan, and I can imagine being a part of it as well.
Yeah, as a fan, and I'm speaking now, I was wanting there to be a regional near us. I mean, you kind of look at this was a year that, maybe we could just jump in the car and go watch. I was pulling so hard for friends to make it, some that did and some that didn't. But I can't, Dan McDonald and I are good friends, but I can't just jump in the car and drive up to Louisville. He kind of picked with me the other day to come on, we'll get you and Rock in. But that's a long ride. I was hoping to have something closer. It seems like this year is really, gosh, as we sit here, is the closest one to us, East Carolina, maybe?
Yeah, Chapel Hill-ish.
Chapel Hill, yeah. So it's really weird. I guess Georgia Southern, my wife played volleyball there. I guess we could go to Statesboro and see it. That's a cool one to do. But it's just that environment's so fun. I mean, really, if I could do it, and I still think about doing it, but we play this weekend with his travel ball team, there's nothing cooler than what you said. There's going to be a 1-run game on that opening night that no one suspected. And that's why I said it might be Tennessee. I mean, you never know, because the interesting part, too, we've already noticed Miami's playing the noon game. So they're giving the night game to the 2-3 seed because you get the choice. You can choose as the host which one you want. South Carolina, Coach Tanner always just said, look, we're the host playing tonight. Our fans deserve it. We're going to do it. But you can look around and see where some teams try to strategically say, okay, we'll play at noon, meaning, you know, if we win, that team that wins may not even be in their hotel till 1 o'clock that night, and they'll be tired. Or if we lose, we don't have to turn around and be that team to show back up the next morning. So sometimes there's a lot of strategy. But when I was at Ole Miss in South Carolina, there was no strategy. We're playing the night game. Our fans are coming. Don't worry about it. Stop worrying that so-and-so's playing a noon game. We're playing the night game. So that's always interesting to me to see how that transpires.
For sure. And then you're talking about the Miami one specifically with the weather concerns. Maybe you get in the first game, maybe you don't get in the second game, and you got all that to mess with too. As I'm continuing to look at this bracket, Arkansas as the 2 seed at Oklahoma State. You got other SEC teams, Georgia as the 2 seeds in Chapel Hill. Talking about SEC teams, one of the 5 who didn't host, right? 4 ACC and 4 SEC teams all hosting regionals. So that's half of the regional hosts. And then you had 9 from each conference popping in. I look at Arkansas going to Stillwater. Stillwater, tons of tradition there at Oklahoma State for sure. Right. We saw them come to Columbia and win a super regional in the Chad Holbrook era. But Arkansas, everything they expect. Georgia, not quite there, but they've had plenty of postseason success as well. If I'm looking for some upsets, I think I might put those 2 towards the top of the list as road teams who might come out of regionals. What about you?
Yeah, I have. When I lived and coached at Ole Miss, a lot of kids were recruited from Arkansas. Obviously, it's right there. So I was talking to a dad of one of our kids that he wanted his son to go to Arkansas. They didn't recruit him. We did at junior college, and he's a great player. But it's amazing how we think just as Carolina fans, we're always grumbling, or I guess Clemson too. But as he was telling me, he goes, Arkansas, boy, this year they need a clean house. I said, they're a 2 seed. and everybody thought they probably might have snuck in to be in the top 16 team. And he goes, well, nope, didn't build that stadium to be going on the road. And I just started laughing because I really wish I could have recorded it. But that's why Arkansas, and that's why we've been so good. It's, hey, there better be a lot of changes there, because we don't build a stadium like this to be going to Oklahoma State to play. But I guarantee you Oklahoma State's not excited to have Arkansas coming. They got a good team. And we've watched Arkansas or Oklahoma State a lot this year because with ESPN Plus, and when you know players, because one of our players last year, Mendham, transferred over there. So my son gets really close with guys I've coached, probably even sometimes more than me. So we watched Oklahoma State play. They are gorilla ball looking guys. They're one of the most physical teams. Their pitchers all are physical. They've all got tattoos. I mean, it looks like a very physical team. So that's another regional I'm going to be tuning into, because I think you're going to see some fireworks in that regional. The way they play, the way I know Arkansas wants to play, I think you're going to see some fireworks in that regional.
All right, so let's rank it here. I'm looking in the SEC teams who didn't end up hosting. So the teams that hosted, Tennessee number 1, yep. And then you have Florida, Auburn there towards the end. They're 13, 14 seeds, and you had Texas A&M as the 5 seed. So they're the ones favored to move on to the Super Regionals. Then you got Vanderbilt going on the road to Oregon State as a 2 seed. So let's write these down on the road teams. You got Vandy, Georgia at North Carolina. You mentioned LSU at Southern Miss.
Yep. And
the one that I just mentioned as well on the road was you got Ole Miss in Miami too. So I think we got them all down there pretty much. You putting LSU at the top of that list?
I am. I just think, Coach Bianco's son played for LSU. So, again, it gives you a reason to watch some games. He's not an everyday guy, but he was a guy that I just love to watch. I love the way LSU's team, I think they've got an incredible future for that team. We saw them last year firsthand when all them guys are freshmen. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be a pain in the butt for Southern Miss and everybody else in that regional. So that's going to be a big one for me. I don't know why the committee does it. Seems like Vandy, if they don't host, always gets sent out west.
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
feel like I've watched them at Oregon State or Oregon somewhere every year. It's rainy and it's a late game and you're watching them, play. So I think they're going to, just the way Coach Corbin has always coached in regionals, you feel like they're a team. I surely wouldn't want to say they don't have a chance to win that thing. They'll go out there and pitch their tail off in that drizzly rain and, win 3-2 every night. And especially with their center fielder who could play the entire outfield if they wanted him to, I think, as fast as he is. But
I've seen where he's got 30-plus stolen bases, which is so many more than so many teams out there.
He was more than teams, which that's a different day subject. It's amazing how no one steals bases anymore. With us growing up with the St. Louis Cardinals were always, and obviously Ricky Henderson, nobody steals bases. But Georgia kind of flattened out as the year went on. And if I'm North Carolina, I'd probably be glad I got them instead of an LSU. I just felt like Georgia just kind of, I don't know. It just kind of went into a trot more than a jog even at the end of the year to have them coming in. I think Miami, again, I think Ole Miss is out to prove a lot. They may just be out to prove they should be there. They might be fighting for his job. We don't know. But I know they're going to go down there and be well prepared and give you everything they got. And we saw them here, that one game here, I thought they were as good as anybody in the country. And then South Carolina was still able to win that series from them. I actually got to do that TV game, and that was the only one that I just thought Ole Miss left so many guys on base. So if they get hot and start driving the ball offensively, they're going to be hard to handle. But the weather's always an issue in these. It was for us. You remember at East Carolina, we ended up getting a day off in that regional that allowed us to then have more bullpen guys to win the regional next day. We didn't even play on that Sunday back in 18 at East Carolina because of rain. So rain can definitely be your ally if it works out for you.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about from almost an X's and O's standpoint. If you win a regional, you got to win 3 games. You've been playing all season long where you're looking to win 2 out of 3 in a series. Yeah. How does the strategy change? And do you feel like, you mentioned how Coach Corbin coaches in regionals. Do you feel like certain programs, certain coaches just have the right formula? They make their program kind of gear it towards more of a regional play as opposed to a regular season?
Yeah, well, the big thing will be interesting to see is who do they start game 1? You said like Tennessee's playing Alabama State, I believe. Do you just still leave your Friday night guy there? Or do you say, I think we can beat them with our Saturday guy? Or I don't think you'd say your third starter, but Ray
Tanner never did that, right? He always did the Friday guy.
And that's where you get yourself in trouble because, let's go with our whatever guy. Well, you've just told your team, whether you wanted to or not, you just told your team, hey, we're better than them. Let's just throw our gloves out there and they're going to wilt. Well, that ain't going to happen. And then if you're that other team, you're going easily now into your team meeting. Hey, they don't think we're very good. They're starting their down the line guy. They're starting, they're not starting their Friday guy. So it's from the moment your team is announced on Monday until about late Tuesday afternoon, there are a lot of people still trying to figure out who they're going to throw. That was another thing that Coach made pretty easy. Hey, we're throwing our Friday guy. If we're fortunate enough, maybe he won't throw, but maybe we can get him out with 50 pitches because we have offensively taken control of the game, and God forbid we could bring him back if we needed to on Monday in another role, which a kid could do at this time of year. So that's what we did, and it just made it simple. And I thought it gave less, locker room, whatever you call it, for that team to say. So that's where I'm curious when they start releasing starters, which should be happening today. Most teams are because there's travel day. I think most teams are even maybe traveling in the day. They'll practice in the morning at their site and then play Friday. So you'll start to see which teams are throwing their, as we call them, Friday night guys. Are they bumping down, trying to win a game and have that guy to match up in that? Because the second game, we know, is always pitting usually the top 2 teams. 2 and 3 could be a coin flip. But usually it matches 1 versus that 2 and 3, usually. So that's always fun to watch and see how that'll be handled.
So other coaching staffs, do you feel like they make it a little too complicated, or you just feel like they're playing more personnel?
I'll just stop you right. I think you just make it way too complicated. I think sometimes we think we're way too smart as baseball coaches. That was always a joke when we were in the room arguing. It's usually Tolman would say, "Hey, none of us, are smart here. Why are we all acting like we are? Let's just do what we've done." And it would make it light, and it just allowed you to move on, because you sit around sometimes and you try to think, could we come up with a better wheel? No, the wheel's working fine. Let's make sure it's got enough air in it. Let's make sure we practice right. And that was what was always fun for me this time of year.
I think good advice for just everyday life in a lot of ways. It's just, a lot of times the simplest or easiest answer is the answer, and you can overthink it. You got to move forward.
I agree. Now I'm going to tell you who helped us a lot back in those days was Dr. Casper, because he might have been the smartest guy in the room. And as we'd all argue in this, he'd go, "Hey, we never had talked about this during the season. Why are we talking about it now?" And you'd kind of go, "Yeah, good point. We never tried to get all fancy with this guy's going here." And he would make some light of it that, "Hey, let's just go eat. Let's go eat lunch. You guys stop. Let's just do it." And we would, and it would. And in most part, it usually worked out pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so. The value of a sports psychologist, I always find it really fascinating that the smartest people can have the most education and yet still just go back to common sense, right? You'd learn all this stuff. You got to know enough to break the rules sometimes, right? And just be like, enough.
You do. I can't imagine why a head coach wouldn't have a person like him on his staff. I was constantly looking to get, as I learned, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you need to get out of that room quick, because you're not getting any better. And that was how I've always felt. And Doc kept you going in that way.
Well, you know what you just did? You gave your exit speech right there.
Yeah.
Smartest guy in the room. Time for you to get out of the room so you can go learn something. Well done.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
Been fun, and hopefully we get talk next week. And at that point, this thing will be narrowed down, and we can be trying to see who's the best super regional set up. So it'll be exciting. And again, I don't think we'll know who's Clemson's guy for a few more weeks. So just my hunch, unless some things happen this weekend, there'll be some shocking upsets. So maybe that guy will be available sooner than later.
But if you're just joining us, didn't catch the first part of the program where we really got into it, Stuart is telling us that he thinks Clemson is going to go after a big-time name for sure, and the next Clemson coach will be a name that has had a bunch of success in college baseball, right?
I think you have to. If you're going to say, hey, character, likability is not enough.
And not just that, I saw 100% graduation rate, I think, recently.
100%. I mean, it's just if you're saying that, okay, that's not enough, then you certainly can't say less is. So whatever they're going to try to do is they're going to try to match, which they're going to have a hard time just matching what he is as a person. But if they're able to match that, then obviously you want to get a guy that maybe has had what you said, the success that he brings that in with him immediately so people can latch on to it. That's the only way possible I see that they made this move.
Man, good stuff there, and breaking down the NCAA tournament, and even talking some Brown stuff with us today. Stuart Lake, appreciate the time as always. Do it again next week. Sound good?
Yes, sir. Enjoyed it. See y'all then.
All right. Stuart Lake, ladies and gentlemen, former Gamecock assistant coach, former Charleston Southern head coach, a guy who's plugged into the state of South Carolina from a baseball perspective as well as anybody, and now as a dad doing it with his son at Mid-Carolina High School as a prospect, and doing it from almost the opposite side of the recruiting deal. Tons of great perspective from Stuart Lake. And again, it's nice to hear it from the inside as well, because I think it's easy for us to maybe get things skewed from the outside, and we don't see all the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. We get to see the results this time of year, all the fun that the teams that are winning and continuing on have. And it's nice to hear from his perspective too. That's also what is really valued on the inside, man. That's what sticks with people for a long, long time, these special runs that teams have. And again, kind of exacerbates the frustration, I think, from the state of South Carolina this year, with Coastal Carolina the only team to make the NCAA Division I tournament. You got North Greenville making that run to the Division II College World Series for the first time ever. And the news recently that Mark Kingston going to stay with the Gamecocks now, as Gamecock fans look over and see their rival Monte Lee and Clemson moving on. And hearing what we heard from Stuart Lake, interesting about the big time name. Possibly, he's saying, is going to be the next head coach at Clemson baseball. Sees a guy with a big time reputation taking it over. That it's not overly surprising, I guess. It's a big time job. We all know that. I mean, just look at the numbers from Monte Lee recently, or in his 7 years, where he's 242 and 136, and 16 games over 500 in the ACC, 102 and 86. So nothing that is embarrassing at all, but the trend was going the wrong way in the last couple of years. 60 and 50 overall, and then 7 games under 500 in the ACC. You combine that with the 10th most draft picks of any school in Division I college baseball in the last 5 years, and you say the talent that you're bringing in, you're not maximizing it. Got to have better results. It's a results-based business, just like Stuart was touching on there at the end. You can be of the utmost character and do everything right off the field, but when you're a coach at that level, you're paid to win. And it didn't happen enough for Clemson baseball. To me, another kind of natural result of you don't want to be the guy following the guy. And it was Monte Lee at Clemson after Jack Leggett and the tremendous Hall of Fame run that he had. And I get it, Clemson fans massively frustrated and disappointed, angry, however you want to look at it, that he never got over the hump and won a national championship with being so close, and especially having South Carolina knock him out a couple of times in the semifinals when they had to beat Clemson twice. But body of work, massively impressive. And we don't talk about it enough. Consistency and how incredible, like the run that Gary Gilmore continues to be on with Coastal Carolina being back in the NCAA tournament. We talk about it kind of as a footnote on the show. Yeah, Coastal Carolina, the only team in the state of South Carolina. And then we move on to other stuff. But the fact that they are the only team, like Stuart talked about how Gary Gilmore's office used to be in a trailer not too long ago, how they had to host a super regional against the Gamecocks back in 2010 at the Myrtle Beach Pelicans Park because their on-campus facility just wasn't there. They've invested there. They won the national championship in the great Cinderella run. But now to see the Carolina and Clemson programs where they are, and again, not the only ones in the country, Arizona State, Southern Cal, and a couple other big-time perennial powerhouse programs, not where they used to be. It's not a given in college baseball. They kind of tweak the rules to give other programs more of a chance, right? Limits on rosters, limits on how you give out scholarships. And now we see what we see. I think overall, it's a stronger college baseball product. Unfortunately for the state of South Carolina, it has resulted in disappointing years, disappointing runs now after legendary runs. And almost unfathomable results from the Carolina perspective, winning, 22 NCAA tournament games in a row. And great to hear Stuart's kind of behind-the-scenes perspective of the strategy going into that. Hey, this is what's worked all season long. Let's not change it now. And to me, that's where coaches, you can take in all the information, but you got to have that wisdom like Stuart's talked about before, and how analytics in baseball especially can blind you. Sometimes you get too much data, you get up to your eyes in it, and you can't really see what's in front of you and make sometimes the easiest choice is the right choice. And that applies, I think, to so many things in life. Now, I'm wondering what you guys think of the choice that Columbia's own Irmo native, Dustin Johnson, made in golf. I think it is fascinating because make no bones about it, when this field of 42 came out yesterday, the first ever field in this LIV tour, the LIV event that's going to be in London next week. Dustin Johnson, the headliner, for sure. I think we were all looking for Phil Mickelson's name on there. Just assume, with everything that Phil's gone through recently, having not played on the PGA Tour, having not played in the Masters of the PGA Championship, where he was the defending champion, I assumed at least you get paid for it, man. For the hit your reputation took and sponsors dropping you and the whole thing. But I guess when you say that you make some disparaging comments about the Saudi Arabian-backed LIV tour or event series, maybe I should say, that maybe you don't feel comfortable there either. But Dustin Johnson does. Says he made the decision because he felt it was in the best interest of his family. Dustin has had a tremendous run, and I'm talking from being a guy who didn't know his name at the Columbia City golf tournament back in the day, where he ended up winning while he was still at Coastal Carolina. And then seeing his consistency. We just talked about consistency. Man, that's been the most impressive thing about Dustin Johnson through the years. Not that he ascended to number one in the world, but his consistent winning year after year after year. I think only Tiger has won a tournament in consecutive years more than Dustin Johnson. And now to see this sticking out his neck a little bit, I feel like this is something that only a guy like Dustin Johnson can get away with in a lot of ways. Because of his personality being what it is so kind of go with the flow, low key, that you're not, I don't think, going to see people nationally pounding their fists and wagging their fingers because, well, he's towards the backslide of his career, you would think, right? He's not number one in the world. I think he's number 13 in the world right now. Nowhere. I don't mean to say that he is old and over the hill by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not the number one player in the world. He is not at his pinnacle right now. He seems to be past that. And you wouldn't think he's going to end up going back the other way. Maybe he will. I'm pulling for him. I love watching him play golf. I think he's great for golf. And I don't mind this at all. I get it when you're talking about Tiger versus Phil. And you're going to say legacy. That's the argument for, I guess, all the PGA Tour guys to be loyal to the PGA Tour, right? But when you're in Dustin Johnson's position and the money is so absolutely ridiculous, I think we're all a little disingenuous by wagging our finger and saying legacy and the whole thing, and not to at least concede that, hey, man, once it gets to a certain number, if you turn that down, there's going to be a lot of regret there. So I don't blame Dustin Johnson for doing this at all. I am fascinated to see how the PGA Tour handles he and the other very few PGA Tour members who have gone on to do this. They denied the exemption originally and said that this is not part of your PGA Tour membership or whatever. The tour can't allow this and the whole thing. Well, Dustin Johnson's in a position, I think, in a position of strength, and he's not the Phil Mickelson position where he came out and it clearly seemed to kind of be leveraging one opportunity versus the other and not necessarily be loyal. And he's not Tiger Woods either. Like Tiger is by himself. I feel like it's Tiger, Phil, and then kind of everybody else, and Dustin Johnson's at the top of that list. And so when you see other international guys, we knew Sergio Garcia was going to do this. Ian Poulter, Graham McDowell, Louis Oosthuizen, Charles Schwartzel, Lee Westwood, the big-time international names going into this a field of 42, and there are going to be 6 more names, I think, announced after this weekend's events. But you put Dustin Johnson in there, knowing, though, that he's really the American name. I'm fascinated to see how it turns out. I think it's good for the game of golf in general to see this challenge rise up. We've seen it in football how many times, right? XFL, USFL a couple of times now that it's back. The NFL always dominates. And I feel like it almost gets stronger. It absorbs the challenge almost. I feel like some kind of a snowball, right? It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger and stronger, more momentum. I don't think we're watching the end of the PGA Tour or anything else. I think we're seeing a lot like in college sports, where name, image, and likeness and cost of attendance have helped players get a bigger piece of the pie. We're seeing that impact those other entities recruiting the big time names in golf with this guaranteed money if you're going to play in amounts in a lot of ways to an exhibition. I mean, these things have happened before, but it's never been organized into an 8-event series. It's never had Greg Norman as its face, never had a big-time name that we can identify with. And so I get Jack Nicklaus saying he turned down $100 million to do it because he helped basically build the PGA Tour. I think Greg Norman coming at it from the raised in Australia and maybe more international perspective, I get where he's coming from. I got no problem with him trying to spearhead something, get something going. Again, I think golf's in a really healthy place overall. And we just saw that with the PGA Championship, where there weren't necessarily superstars battling it out. You did have Rory sneak in there, and obviously Justin Thomas ended up winning that thing, a proven commodity. But you had a bunch of guys that were looking for their first career wins total. And a lot of those young guys, and I thought it was just fine. He had Tiger back in the mix at least, not being able to play that fourth round with the leg, and who knows how that's going to continue to work to move forward. But it seems like he will get even healthier and stronger, hopefully, become more of a factor, possibly. But just to have him involved, and then now to have this is a threat to the PGA Tour, but I don't think it's a threat to those of us who like to watch golf on TV, fans of just golf. It's one of those deals where I don't quite understand people that get attached to a players union versus a league kind of thing. To me, that's all just a bunch of lawyers divvying up a massive pot of money one way or the other. And that's not what I watch sports for. It's the same deal. I get to watch Dustin Johnson on TV in a pretty good field where I know a bunch of others' names and see major champions battling it out, and something I haven't seen before. Sign me up. I'm in. You're going to pay the guy millions of dollars to do it? I can't blame him. How can I blame him for that? So it's much different than the Phil Mickelson situation in a lot of ways. First of all, Phil and Dustin Johnson are massively different personalities, right? Phil Mickelson loves the spotlight, likes to mix it up a little bit, and certainly has taken advantage in a lot of ways, maximized his opportunities. Dustin Johnson, I think you could argue, I mean, he's on all kind of commercials too, but in such a different way, man. In such a different way. And him 3-putting on the 72nd hole at the U.S. Open a bunch of years ago out in Washington State, and losing that one, and then just picking up his baby and saying, yeah, well, there are more important things to life, or the whole thing. Like, wow. So I'm fascinated to see what ends up happening with this entire series. A part of me is certainly glad that a guy like Dustin Johnson is part of it. I think just the fact that he is from Columbia, he is who he is going to be fascinating to watch how he handles this. Obviously, a bunch of criticism going to come his way if it hasn't already. But I think he handles it better than maybe anybody across sports. It just seems not to have an effect on him. And I know he gets made fun of for it in a lot of ways. But man, just the fact that it's him headlining this thing, not Phil Mickelson. Like, I feel like Phil would definitely feel the need to defend himself or defend the situation. And Dustin just put out a statement through his agent yesterday. Yeah, felt like it's something that his family, an opportunity his family couldn't decline. I mean, when we put it like that, yeah, agreed. I mean, sure, the critics will say he's already made a ton of money and just going for the money grab, and where's the loyalty and the whole thing? But is that really how we work? Is that how most of us work? I don't know. I don't know how much that applies here. And he handled it, like he's always handled stuff under the radar, just doing it. Now he's going to go play, and I'm interested to see how it works for sure. Speaking of that, SEC meetings going on down in Destin, Florida. Might have seen the picture yesterday of Shane Beamer and Lamont Paris, Don Staley hopping on the old USC plane heading down to Destin. And this thing, I think we can overhype it most years, it is May. It is that time of year where we're not close to football necessarily, right? We're removed from spring football, not quite into the preseason magazine stage yet of summer. But to have this year's discussion in place, to know what a massive change is on the horizon for the SEC, just with Oklahoma and Texas coming in. But then how do you organize football? How do you run football? So apparently we're down to just two options. That's the word, right? Lane Kiffin gonna leave it to Lane Kiffin to confirm it publicly. But it seems like the original idea that popped out with pods is out of there. It's too many problems with that, or too many specific schools complaining that their pod was unfair, which would just be what I think the other real option is, right? I guess the difference between pods and three permanent opponents is that, excuse me, your three permanent opponents aren't going to necessarily be the permanent opponents for who you're playing, right? So you all four of those schools, you and the three permanent opponents, don't have the same permanent opponents, as opposed to a pod system where that would be the case, or a division system then where the winner of that division would move on. So it's simplifying it to a certain degree, but three permanent opponents and then six rotating opponents every other year, right? So you would play all 15 other teams in a span of 2 years, and in a span of 4 years, all the schools would come visit your school. I love that idea. The problem on the surface is obviously moving from 8 conference games in the SEC to 9. So the other option on the table right now is just one permanent opponent and then 7 rotating opponents every other year. So again, you get the math to add up to 15 in a 2-year span, the other 15 teams in a 16-team league, and everybody's going to be coming to your place. You're going to be going to every place in a 4-year span. Again, I'm good with either one right now. Either one to me signifies a major upgrade in the SEC football fan experience. And that's where I'm coming from this thing from. Now, you're talking about a South Carolina specific approach. I don't think it's going to be helpful from a competitive advantage or a competitive standpoint. And Shane Beamer talked about that yesterday and said what you would expect someone in his position to say, that competition is a core value in the program, and we get the opportunity to go play this schedule. The schedule is going to be tough every year. It's always been tough, and we're going to end up talking about this thing and doing what's best for the SEC. But from the fan experience, I'm good either way. I'm wondering where this will end up, because I'm guessing. My guess will be that you do the one permanent opponent and the 7 rotating deals. You keep it at 8 games because of the way the money works out. The way that the money of schools hosting a smaller school, maybe even another out-of-conference game, but the opportunity to schedule that, then also the opportunity to notch that win total up 1 and make sure your teams are going and getting bowl money. That seems to be where it will be likely to go. Also, you minimize the complaining of both fans and schools about those 3 permanent opponents. Because Shane Beamer touched on this yesterday as well. That is going to be an issue. No doubt about it. There are going to be complaints. There will be plenty of schools out there, probably every single one in the SEC, all 16, to say, nope, this is unfair because we are getting jobbed on this because look at our 3 permanent opponents. And if they don't say it off the bat, then they'll end up saying it right down the line when those 3 opponents just happen to be on cycling through on a good run in football, especially. because you're not going to get 3 opponents in the SEC who don't end up having a good run at some point unless you're going, no, you can't do it. I can't do it off the top of my head. I was going to say, South Carolina has always had the Vandy and Kentucky, and then you go over to Arkansas in the West, which would be the one that I feel like has been the most down recently, but that doesn't even make sense now, right? Kentucky and Arkansas up these days. Vanderbilt outside of Vandy, you can't do it. So I guess the one problem with the one permanent opponent would be, I would assume Tennessee would probably end up matching up with Vandy, right? Instant built-in advantage for Tennessee versus everybody else. Whoever gets, I would assume Auburn would get Alabama. I don't know if Auburn fans automatically complain there, but on paper, clear disadvantage right now. That'd be great if Texas and Texas A&M would do it. But then who do you stick with, Oklahoma, right? Or do you put Texas's permanent opponent is Texas A&M, and then Oklahoma's permanent opponent is Texas? Could you do that? I don't know. It's going to be weird. It's going to be different for sure. But I'm good with either one moving forward, because you don't get that weird situation where you're in the same conference and yet you never play the other school. They never come to your place, or you never go there, or there was that one time in the 6 or 8 year span where it worked out. And then the permanent crossover thing, I thought the SEC did it right when South Carolina came in back in the day with the divisions and creating the championship game and the whole thing. They redefined how college football was done, right? Maybe college sports. Redefined it, doing something that really had never been done. And it made sense then. And then as soon as Missouri comes and joins the SEC East, get out of here. What's going on? That doesn't make any sense at all. Just geography, right? And then we saw basketball from an SEC perspective go away from the division several years ago. No problem. Nobody cares. I don't think it has mattered one bit in basketball. And now that the NCAA a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, got rid of that rule that you do have to have divisions and division winners for a championship game, I think it's great for college football in general, because the more you get to see of all of your conference, the more you have the opportunity for natural rivalries to happen. And that's what's happened. I mentioned Missouri randomly there. That's what's happened with South Carolina and Missouri, excuse me, in a lot of ways. That women's basketball weird thing with their AD and the whole deal a couple of years ago, kind of at the top of that list. But you have both schools in Columbia. Another weird coincidence there that I think, continues to develop between the fan bases. Had the classic 2013 game with Connor Shaw coming off the bench, and the kick going off the upright, and South Carolina, huge comeback and celebrating there. You had Missouri winning the East a couple of times as soon as they got into the league. So who would have thought that would ever be a thing? And it was only a thing because of the divisions, but I think you're going to get a lot more than you're going to miss. And yeah, some old school, long-standing traditions will probably have to go by the wayside. But I think that is definitely worth losing when you're talking about what you're going to gain by the opportunity to see more teams coming in, the opportunity to take more trips. I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to seeing when this gets announced and how the messaging is put out there by the SEC. I know Greg Sankey said sooner rather than later he expects this to be done, not necessarily decided officially at these SEC meetings. So I don't know if we're going to hear it here in the next couple days / weeks, but I think it will be relatively soon. And then it's just a matter of us counting down. All right, 2025, is that really when Oklahoma and Texas are coming in the league? Or have things been put into motion where that is going to happen quicker than originally announced, and TV deals are going to get reworked? Maybe those schools are going to have to pay more money. Certainly, the SEC can figure out a way to make that happen if they want to. So that's where I'm at with the SEC meetings from that standpoint. It was odd to see Lamont Paris, Don Staley, and Shane Beamer as the triumvirate heading out on the plane yesterday. On social media, the picture right before they hopped on, it was odd just because I guess I'd never seen all three of them there. But just the the change in leadership in the basketball program for sure, and the football program not too long ago. It's a different day for sure for Gamecock athletics being shown at the SEC meetings, but that is, man, what major college athletics is. And fascinated to continue to see how Lamont Paris puts his stamp on the Gamecock basketball program, asking Stuart Lake about, who defines a baseball program more in college, right? The coach or the school. And South Carolina basketball has been that program through the years. I know Frank Martin wanted to put his stamp on the program coming in and said it was going to be the program in college basketball that played the hardest. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get that consistency. You look at the Final Four year and certainly say, well, that was incredible. And it was a great run. But then not being able to develop that consistency. He talked about it one year at the end of a year. He's like, yes, now we have our expectations set. Our players understand what is required of them. And so the foundation of the program was there. I think this was maybe right before the Final 4 years. But we saw afterwards that just wasn't able to keep it going there. What about the new coach? What about Lamont Paris? What about his philosophy or his identity of the program? Because we've talked about it many times that how Shane Beamer's been able to do that. Unlike, I think, so many other coaches who have tried, or unlike other coaches who had so much to prove, I think, coming in. Maybe he's done it just better, more clearly, maybe valued it more. I don't know. So how the basketball program will handle that moving forward is something to keep an eye on, and maybe something that might come out relatively soon. We'll start to see that take shape, as obviously recruiting has been highest priority, number one, with several transfers, about a half dozen out of the program. And you got to get the players in first. You can talk all you want to, but you got to get results. And that's what it comes down to today, with the news of the day popping out yesterday about Clemson firing baseball coach Monte Lee. And again, Stuart Lake anticipating that Clemson will go after and end up getting a big name college baseball coach. Saw the critics or maybe skeptics out there on social media yesterday just saying how much Clemson will have to pay to do that, and how that has not been the case from the baseball perspective. Certainly, you got to think from a financial standpoint, the athletics department in a position to do that, and probably understanding what the fan base is anticipating, expecting from a name standpoint, from a results and production standpoint, that the NCAA tournament is not an option. It's not optional for Carolina or Clemson. That is not where these programs certainly have been and are expected to be. It's a lot like the basketball tournament for a lot of blue blood basketball programs. I think South Carolinians, Gamecocks, and Clemson fans, rightly so, just have seen that so many times through the years and expect that. And that's where those programs should be. They're not there. And now it's Mark Kingston's job to get that Gamecock program back there. And it, by all accounts, I think we all can figure out he's got a year to do it. He's got a season to do it. And if it doesn't happen, then somebody else will be in charge of it. Monte Lee had just one more year to do it this year and couldn't get it done. And now it will be someone else's turn. It will be much more advantageous for the next person than it was for Monte, simply because they're going to be the guy after the guy, right? Not the guy who follows the guy. You never want to be that guy. You're going to be one removed from that. So the opportunity to come in and be kind of an instant fan favorite, and you got to get the players to do it. You got to have some results to do it. You got to go on a run. And that's what we're about to see here in the next couple of weeks, right? Some baseball teams out there, 8 of them going on the run to the College World Series. Only one South Carolina team will have the chance. So Coastal Carolina in that NCAA tournament as a number 3 seed, headed on the road. I think I got that scrolling on the ticker when they play Virginia in that East Carolina regional. So Virginia just seems to be connected to South Carolina in a lot of ways, coming to Columbia last year and upsetting both the Gamecocks and Old Dominion, getting out of that regional and making a run, and now matched up with Coastal Carolina in that College World Series opener, or the NCAA tournament opener, I should say. If Coastal Carolina is going to make a run, it'll start against Virginia, and it'll have to go through East Carolina, we certainly all assume. And really appreciate Stuart Lake joining us, the former Gamecock assistant, Charleston Southern head coach, breaking down the NCAA tournament as a whole, talking specifically about a guy he knows pretty well in Monte Lee, who followed him on Coach Ray Tanner's staff at the University of South Carolina before going on to be a head coach at the College of Charleston and then at Clemson from there. But it is a new day for South Carolina sports in a lot of ways. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us today on Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent, a Wednesday, beautiful summer day. June is here. The summer sports conversations in the state of South Carolina can be creative, let's say. So I'm looking forward to doing that with you guys. Thank you all for your participation throughout the day. Mark, Troy, Hope, Jan, see you guys. Anthony, appreciate the compliment there. Jason as well. Thank you guys for tuning in and supporting the show. Please do the usual things if you haven't already. The subscribing on the YouTube page, the liking and commenting always help as well. If you can, spread the word. Help us out on the social media aspect as well. Got the new open to the show today. That's what was the big addition as we kick off June. And again, thank you for being a part of Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent.